Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over using the pre-built LLaMafiles, a bunch of the different use cases that they can be applied to, and also, importantly, where do you find all of these pre-built LLaMafiles. So we'll go over downloading, once we find them, we'll go over downloading the pre-built LLaMafiles that are supplied to us, and then immediately you have one of two things that you need to do. If you're on Linux or macOS, you just have to grant execute permissions, and, all of the stuff that I do, all the stuff that I demonstrate is on, generally speaking, on Ubuntu. So we'll be doing the Linux course here. But the other thing, if you're on Windows, you'll have to, after downloading the LLaMA file, you'll have to rename it just to include a .exe at the end of the file name, just to make it executable. And then generally on Windows, if you're using a LLaMA file that's over, I think, 4 gigabytes, you'll have to immediately jump to a more sophisticated usage where you have to run the LLaMA file with external weights. They can't be embedded into the overall LLaMA file because of some sort of file size limit that Microsoft puts on running a program in their operating system. Again, if Windows can complicate something, they will. It's to someone like me, Windows is nothing but a nightmare. And so if you're on Windows and you have to rename it to .exe and you're over the 4 gigabyte or whatever that is, whatever that limit is, and hopefully with one of these gazillion Windows 11 versions that are going to come out, maybe they'll get rid of that. I have no idea. They probably need to make some fundamental changes that are not easy, or maybe they are easy and they just have a very malicious reason for it. I'm not sure. I don't know why they have this file size limit. At any rate, so after that, downloading, granting execute permissions if you're on Linux or Mac OS, then either route, you come right to running the LLaMA file. And what does that mean, to run a LLaMA file? Well, it depends on your purpose or your problem or whatever it is you're getting yourself into. And so just to summarize these real quick, you can spin up the server and it comes with a basic chat interface. And if you have one of the newer pre-built LLaMA files, you'll have a V2 server, just a version 2, and it comes with a much nicer chat interface in the browser. Another thing, this is what I use LLaMA files for a lot, is spinning up a server, and I'll show you how that works. And you're spinning up this server with or without the chat via the browser. You just use a no browser flag if that's all you're going to be using it for, is actually as an LLM server. There's some, this probably gets pretty sophisticated, but not in my life, but I'll show you some basic usage using it as a CLI tool. There are other tools that are probably a lot better because of how verbose the output is, and you'll see what I mean by that when we do it. You can run embeddings. These LLaMA files are used for, you can set up any number of things. You can set up a basic RAG system, a very minimalistic RAG. You can set up a very complex one with these LLaMA files too, but we'll start out after this video and after building everything, all the tools from scratch, and then making a LLaMA file from scratch in the videos right after this one. Beyond that, we'll get into some very sophisticated usage of LLaMA files, setting up RAG systems and agents, not just the things that I find cool. I'm going to demonstrate the things that I find useful, things that I can use them for in everyday life, things that I can use them for in other people's businesses. I'm really only concerned with practical usage of these things. And if there's something wildly cool that has no practical usage, I might include it, but I probably don't want to spend that sort of time, making videos over things that aren't useful, but at least not useful to me or anyone that I know. For local development, these LLaMA files for running local AI, local LLMs, I iterate a lot using local models so that I know that a project that I'm doing or working on will definitively work on the monster models available from any, pick a name, OpenAI, X, Claude, Anthropic's models. I call those the monster models because if I have a software solution involving LLMs and it works solidly with with these local models, I know pretty much for a fact that they're going to work on the monster models with fewer steps even. Another benefit of these llama files is that, you can run them offline. You don't have to have internet access. And, I know the argument, well, what am I doing if I'm not on the internet? Well, there's a lot of automation that can be done. There's a lot of problems that might not be evident if you don't have a business problem that you need solved that can be done much easier, quicker, or whatever with AI solutions. And so we generally, if we're solving a problem that we don't want data sent over the internet, well, then we have to iterate through the problem over and over and over till it works with these models, these local models. And I can tell you right now, having run it a ton, whether it be LLaMafiles or an LLaMA server, the same model run on a LLaMafile local LLM server via a LLaMafile. And I'll show you these side by side. They're faster running via a LLaMafile than running with the LLaMA LLM server. I love the LLaMA project. It's amazing. It's awesome. It's made my life way, way better and easier. But in terms of sheer speed, the LLaMafiles can really blow LLaMA right out of the water. And so if you find in a use case a dedicated model that you need for this certain task, you spin up a LLaMafile LLM server, and you use that. It's definitely the way to go. That being said, in that sort of use case, using it in Bash and Python scripts all the time. I do all the time. I've also integrated, going back and forth with LLMs into some custom GUIs that I've built. I've used PyQt and it's awesome. Generally speaking, you're not building fully fledged, decked out or riced out GUIs for someone or some business's personal problems. Tkinter generally does the trick. I even use what's that other one called? PySimple GUI or something like that. And I think it's a wrapper, and it makes even easier to use the Tkinter project. I'm pretty sure it's PySimple GUI. I've used that one a bunch, and yes, I integrate just with the commands when you press buttons in a GUI and it sends a payload off to an LLM, and then you dump the response into a text field. You integrate these things all the time with a local GUI. And when you're generally doing something like high volume but very simple task, you're going to hook a LLaMafile up to it. You're not going to, even though credits from the monster models are actually pretty cheap. Everyone complains about them, just being a big corporation in their own right, and in that industry. But I tell you, they made this stuff pretty cheap for us. So I'm not really complaining about them, to be honest. But at any rate, enough of that. That's a very explicit use case, a very specific and valid use case. And then here, this is one that I use a lot in conjunction really with setting up a server and connecting with it via the API endpoints. It sets up a OpenAI compatible endpoint, so it's really easy to hook up with. And then I hook up to that with at least one specific tool daily, the Fabric AI command line tool. I sync a LLaMafile server up to my Fabric tool all the time via the OpenAI plugin. It syncs right up to it, and it's awesome. And then this is one I haven't really done yet, but I'm really looking forward to doing it, actually. Running some of the smaller models via LLaMafile and then running them on low power devices and phones. Granted, some phones are probably more powerful than a bunch of laptops I have sitting around, but the other low power devices, the smaller and smaller you can get, yes, the models are less and less capable. But when you have much simpler use cases, then it still kind of makes sense. There's things that you can do, and you will see, after this video where we kind of take a look at some basic usage like this, and then after the following videos where we build everything from the repo and really dial in customization and get the things that you want. We'll get into some other examples and use cases where we kind of dive into some of these things. And believe me, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's so much cool stuff with this. It's something to behold, really, how far people have just really fleshed out what you can do with these things. Because if you go in, so one of the first things that we're going to look at here is downloading pre-built LLaMafiles. Okay, well, where do we find these? And where you find these is where you also find a bunch of other stuff that you can do with these things. If we head over into the repo here, we'll take a look. We're at the top of this repo. Everyone's probably done this, so I'm going to skip this, because I'm sure everyone knows how to do this because it's the only real examples put out there. Spinning up the lava and sending a picture to it and getting a result. I'm sure everyone's done that. I'm not going to recreate that. This is the new V2 server that we were talking about briefly just a few moments ago, and we're gonna demonstrate that. These are a bunch of the models that you can trace down. Here's some command line usage, that they demonstrate here. It looks pretty complicated because of the number of flags and options that you can stack onto a command, and the rest of this kind of really just talks about technical stuff. Okay, so where do we find these things? Well, if you head over to Hugging Face, and if one of the places you can look is huggingface.co/Mozilla-AI. This page right here is kind of an overview page. It talks about some collections that they have. They've started actually supplying some public or pre-built Whisper files, and we're going to do a video on those for sure. And some other things, the structured Q&A is a pretty cool project. It's a lot like something else that we'll find off of the repo. So this is a page that you want to just come and take a look at and click through the links and follow these things out, like the structured Q&A, document to podcast. I could probably, if I really wanted to look into this, I could, kind of tweak this to a document to YouTube video. If you want to get into fine tuning, you can take a look at these things. They're worth looking at. Another page that you probably, this is the structured Q&A right here. If you were to click that, it would take you over to this repo, and this just walks you through setting up using LLaMafiles to Q&A your documents, which, this is something that I do something very much like this, and I'm actually going to probably go through this and then fully fleshed out, probably make a video that walks through setting it up using this system, because this might be a more solid or bulletproof system than what I have. And if it's not, then, I'll include what's stronger or more bulletproof about my system. But this is pretty interesting. Another place that you're going to find the bulk of these models is huggingface.co/Mozilla. Now, if you go to that page on Hugging Face, you'll see a list of the models, data sets, stuff like that. And you can press right here on expand to really get a list of the top 60 some odd models that you can pull down from Hugging Face. You just click right through. Let's say, for instance, if we wanted to get the Olmo 7B, right? We click through on that, and just usually brings you up on the model card tab first, and you can just read some details if you're interested in technical details, which you probably are if you're watching videos like this. But you would go right into files and versions, this second tab right here. Generally, this is where you're going to have a list of the model, the different sizes or quantizations of it. You can tell, generally speaking, if you don't have your window, drawn out to where it expands and you can read the full file names and things like that, you can generally tell right away by these sizes what you're dealing with. The largest one in any given page here is generally going to be the Q8 or whatever is the largest one that is for download. And you can click any number of ways. Clicking here will just start downloading it, and you can gather a bunch of them for testing, because generally speaking, whatever your task is, you want to go with the smallest model that can accomplish that task, just so you're burning up the least amount of compute. And most times I probably end up going with the Q4 on a lot of things, but a lot of times I have to go with the Q8, the larger model. And then every now and then I can get away with one of the tiny guys, one of the tiny versions. Obviously I said tiny versions and my mouse cursor was over the F16. That's not the tiny version. That's about as big as you can get. The Q2 is usually the tiniest version they have of anything. And every now and then I can use one of the smaller quantizations. Not often, but sometimes. And if it nails whatever task I'm giving it, I'm going to use the smallest one that does the job. So that's just how you find these things. So if we were to click back out to this main page again, if you really want to see the list of pre-built LLaMafiles, you're going to go to huggingface.co/Mozilla. That's where you want to go. That gives you all the top ones. Now there's another page, because there's like 60 some odd listed here, along with some data sets and other things like that. But there's another page here where, you know, it's just you do a search and it's huggingface.co/models search equals Mozilla, and this is going to give you 200 plus models, and that probably include, and it's over many pages, looks like 8 pages, and that just includes all different iterations, things that aren't even downloaded anymore. I'm thinking, you know, that I've never scrolled through all 220 models. I just usually pull from the top 62, you know, the most often downloaded models. That's what I pull from. Click through, read the model cards, and see what each one of these does. There's embedding models, there's whisper models, you know, whisper files for transcribing audio, where you can record yourself to an audio file, whether it's a wave, .wave, or, you know, MP3, and I think it usually converts to a WAV file, and then transcribes it to text so that you can feed very, very quickly, so that you can feed what you're saying to an LLM. These things are just awesome. You know, they have all kinds of the different ones. They have the DeepSeek, I'm betting. Yeah, these guys right here. So these DeepSeek models, I don't even have these down on my system yet, you know, so these are things that I'm definitely going to be looking into. Now, I can tell you that, yeah, so it'll tell you here, they build the DeepSeek models on top of another base model. So they're usually built on a Qwen model or on a LLaMA model. In testing that I've done, the DeepSeek models, the DeepSeek R1 models that were built on the LLaMA models, were able to accomplish tasks that the Qwen models were failing. And so the 8B LLaMA model is the one that I use for some, locally speaking, you know, it did nothing compared to a monster model. You know, any of the monster models, they're going to blow all this stuff away. But this guy right here, this guy does some heavy lifting locally, without a doubt. This guy right here is no joke. And you know, the 7B is actually good too, but this guy here, he does some work. This guy's pretty awesome. You know, I'm going to pull both of these down just because. Pull 3 of them down. Why not, right? Why not? And, you know, pulling those down, you'll see, on whether you're on Linux or Mac, you'll see real quickly the process of making them executable, and then you can just fire them right up and use them like right away. This whole ecosystem this whole thing is awesome. Awesome. So at any rate, we'll back out, and, you know, again, this is where you find like all 220 models that are somehow related, whether they're all LLaMafiles or not, I don't know. Here's another thing, like if you go to the LLaMafile repo, and if you go up here and you click back one to Mozilla 8, you're going to find some other interesting stuff that we are going to explore in the future. One of which, you know, like the Q&A that we found through the Hugging Face, this LLaMafile RAG example. Using this as an example, you can then make it pretty sophisticated yourself, and this is pretty cool. I have that in a tab over here, so we'll take a look at that. You know, LLaMafile llama index examples. The auto GPT is something that'll blow you away. You know, going down and finding there's how this thing is. They have libraries in Llama Index and LangChain for using llama files, you know, in your Python code, and we'll explore that too, because it's worth exploring. So we'll get into it. Just clicking back, you find some interesting stuff here. So that, going back to the top of the LLaMafile repo, and this LLaMafile RAG example. This is pretty simple. I just want to show you this real quick. We'll do this in a future video, but I want you to understand how cool this is. If you go to this github.com/Mozilla-8/LLaMafile-RAG-example, if you go to this location, you know, read through this thing, because we're going to do it, and we'll do it with a much more sophisticated data set. I'll simulate something from the real world, and you'll see just how friggin' awesome this thing is, because we can iterate this and then sync many of these together, and you can build something, basically iterate over and over this simple setup they have here, and link a bunch of them together with an overall LLM, parsing all these different tinier, smaller databases, RAG systems that we're fleshing out with simulated real-world data, and you'll see something very sophisticated evolve from just this. This is a very, very simple thing to set up. Very simple. It's really cool. So that's enough exploring. This is just wanted to show you kind of in depth where you find all of these things. You know, this is really the main page where you find all it's probably the most comprehensive list by leaps and bounds, the most comprehensive list of llama files available for download and immediate use. This is a site that you're going to want to remember. You're going to want to jot that one down. So that being said, if we come back, we're just going to go over some basic use cases. We'll fire up the server, and then while that server's fired up, we'll be able to look at the new browser, the new chat interface that comes via the browser. We can do an example in the terminal. You'll see how just cluttered the output is on that. And maybe there's a way to to shut off the verbose mode. If there was, I would be using it a lot more because this thing has so many freaking options and flags to tailor your output. In this simpler video, we're not going to build any software. You know, these are just use cases. Maybe we'll go over this one too. I'll show you how I hook it up to the Fabric tool because that's pretty cool. Let's get into a couple things here then. Let's head on down to our downloads. And if you're confused at all about this file system navigator that I'm using, it's called Ranger. You know, I very well could just go through the command line, you know, go through the terminal. So we can CD into downloads, take a look at what we have. And so it's still downloading those larger models, those DeepSeek models. So we'll let that, and earlier I downloaded a bunch of the Whisper files to try out the various sizes. And real quick, we'll just see what I already have ready to go on the system, which should be up in .local. We have Llama 3.2, 1B and 3B right here. We have those two. Obviously, you know, I have the Lava model, and then some of these other guys like the Zipline, the Whisper file, the SD file, and then all of these guys right here. They are all tools built from the repo, and we're going to go through that step by step from scratch. And you can tell a full built llama file, you know, what I call a .llama file, so as to differentiate it from the llama file executable right here. You can tell a .llama file, pre-built, is gigs. There's a couple that are under a gig and they don't have so many use cases. And then all these things that were built from the repo, you can tell they're all megabytes, you know, 10 megabytes or under. Some of them are even down into the kilobytes, under 1 meg. You know, the SD file is probably the largest at 16 megs. Yeah, it is. The SD file, the stable diffusion file, is the largest at 16 megs. The Whisper file is pretty big at almost 10. Some of these other ones, you know, so these things you can tell just by looking at the size. These things are just tools, which you use in conjunction with other things to build. Like, you know, you would take this llamafile executable here, which normally if you use it, and you know what, we're going to stop right there because that's the next video. I don't need to get into explaining that. So at any rate, these are some of the llama files I have. Llama 3.2, 1B, and the 3B. Those are on the system already in a bin directory at .local bin, and they're already made executable. We'll be able to use these guys already wherever we are. So right here, you can see we're back in the user home directory. I have aliased already. You can come down here and take a look, and you'll see right here, I have a llama server that's set up to spin up a server for 3B, llama 3.2.3B. There's a lava server, and then for just using it the command line for spinning up a chat or using as a CLI tool, I have them aliased without running the server or no browser or any of that stuff, just the long name condensed down to a shorter name, just as an alias to make it easier to use at the command line. That's all that is. The llama 3B that I type into the terminal and the llama server, they actually run the same command, just with different flags. Nothing sophisticated at all, really. If we were to run, let's say, let's spin up the llama server, and that spins up on port 8080. And if we go over to the port 8080 and we can shut a bunch of these things down, you see we get this the old style chat interface. Not too exciting looking, right? If we control C to end this and we add --v2, it's all right, we have to run, you can't run the v2 with no browser. Yeah, you can't do that because they're conflicting. So if we were to spin up the llama file, we'll do the 3B and we'll do the server and also the v2, keeping everything on CPU now. And you see it doesn't spin up the in-terminal chat. And if we go to localhost 8080, we're going to see something new here. This is a totally different, way better chat interface in the browser that spins up when you spin up the llama file server. Again, you spin up the server, and then, you know, with the server flag and the v2 flag, then you go and open up localhost 8080 and you'll get this. Now there's some things you can set. Obviously, if you attach a document, I'm pretty sure it's just going to paste it in. It's not going to be like a RAG system, I don't think, if I remember this correctly. So if I go down to where I had some files, I probably have a fake report, just a fake text report. And you can see it just pastes it in. You know, when you press the paper clip and select a text file of some sort, it just pastes it in here for you is all it's really doing. And it does it as, you know, as like a code block with the triple backticks. You shift enter to go to the next lines like that. And, I could say something like summarize and draw insights from the report, along with that little report from a previous video, probably on Fabric, where I was passing variables back and forth through the command line. This is the V2 server, and the V2 server is not just an upgrade on the chat interface in the browser. The V2 server has something like an order of magnitude speed increase, at least with their tests on embeddings, but the meaning inference-wise, the V2 server is like so much faster, I guess, according to their tests. And to be honest with you, I hardly run the V2 server. The regular server is on any given model, the same model, obviously, but it's faster than LLaMA by a bit. You can keep this going back and forth and back and forth. It's pretty cool, I guess, but I never use it. If we go down here and Control C out, clear up our screen, we can also running Llama 3B, which again, having it aliased, it just runs the same thing as this command right here, where the file name is the command because it's in the made executable and in a bin directory. So it's in my system's path. So to do what we just did, I technically could do the alias and then server v2. I could absolutely do that, and it would accomplish the same thing that we just did. Another thing that you can do, running this as a command line tool, you can do -p and then, which just stands for prompt, and this kind of runs as the system prompt. We could use it as completions, where if I were to say 7 years ago, and it should bring up the Lincoln speech or something like it. And you see all of this here. This is why I don't use it as a command line tool. Now, if I were to really go digging deep, there's probably some silent mode or flag that I could do to shut all this off, so I would just have the output here, in which case I would start using it a lot more. I haven't found it. I haven't really looked for it. And in the course of these videos, I will look for it. If I find it, it's what we're going to do. You can see running this as basically a completion engine. Usually it pulls up the Abraham Lincoln speech. At any rate, you can do things like that to run completions at the command line. You can ask it questions. Why is the sky blue? We can see what it does with that. With all of this, there's a bunch of useful information, but this white wall of vomit makes it so that I can't immediately just pipe this response to another tool or to another command. So it's until I figure out how to silence all of this, I don't really use LLaMafiles as a CLI tool, to be honest with you. And we'll stop that. Now, using it as a chat. So if we pull up the help, we'll see right at the top that we can use it as you can specify the CLI or chat or server, which we've done that. But if you specify the chat, there's a couple flags that you can pass to where it's going to infer this. There's all different kinds of stuff and variations to using this. This doesn't apply. This applies if you're using the LLaMafile executable program, not the .llama file with a model and embedded into it. But if we go down real quick, right? We come down here, we're going to start seeing some pretty interesting things. What we can do right here, and I guess this is running it in the CLI options, in the CLI mode. It's good that I remembered this because there's a couple cool things that we can do. Running interactive first, instruct if you have an instruct model, and a reverse prompt, all these things. We'll get into these in detail, but then what you can do with the color and with the instruct, let's say we wanted to do something problem solving oriented or something like that. Now, with this prompt, this is the system prompt, which is it's going to guide the whole conversation. We can add interactive, which it will just start generating. If we add interactive first, it's going to wait for us to either press enter or enter something and then press enter. So that's the difference between the interactive and the interactive first. The interactive first, after sending the system prompt, it's going to wait on us. You can get something really interesting here that you might not have seen before, and we can add color to it. It differentiates the output. So if we ran this in interactive first and with color, you see right here this orange, this is the prompt. If you're using like a fabric pattern for a prompt, this would be very, very elaborate, and it's the system message. It's being used as the system message. Right here, after entering the system prompt, if we just used interactive and not interactive first, this would just start. If we were to have used this and instead we use this, but if we had used this, it would just start generating right away. Having run interactive first, it's waiting on us to type something first, or we can just press enter. But you'll see the color flag that we added to it is going to look like this. And then when I press enter, its responses are in white. And so that's all the colors do. And real quick, this is something that you might want to know too. If you want to interrupt it and actually put something in like a thought, you can press Control C and then you get to interrupt it and you don't have to wait for it to finish. This is what's really awesome about this. This is in CLI mode. This is in the CLI mode, actually. This is what's really cool. Back up and talk about, I'm just making this up as I go, but you see how I just changed the direction of its conversation flow just by you press as it's generating. If you're in the interactive mode and you press as it's generating and you press Control C, you get to interrupt it. And if you press enter, it'll just carry on. But if you enter something, you're going to make it change direction. So you can guide the conversation in a way that you don't really see done with even the monster models. This is really cool. I was going to bring this up as a part of the chat section, but I guess it technically is in the CLI section. This is really cool how this works, and I think you should explore this. Its responses, just so you know, from the time that you type something in and you let it rip, it has, generally speaking, it has a goal to reach on tokens, and you can shorten or lengthen the tokens of its any given output, and that's done through other flags, that book's worth of flags that they have. You can manipulate all these things. You can even, scrolling down, you'll see somewhere down here, have it do embeddings, and that's if you want to start embedding for vector searches. I mean, you can do that all by hand very easily with this. It's stupid easy. But one of the ones around here somewhere is grammar right here. And I believe this is it's still in the CLI mode. But with grammar, for instance, if you want to include an LLM with some serious decision-making capabilities and you just need a yes or no from it, all those crazy, silly things that everyone's doing where they're trying to coerce it into outputting JSON to call or use a tool. Well, you know what? You can, using the BNF grammar, you can make it respond with a yes or no, and then you just have a trigger waiting based on whether it comes out into a file, yes or no, or out into the terminal, yes or no. And then your script or your program can take off so much easier than the way I see a lot of the world doing this stuff. And this is all built in. If you look way under the hood, you find all this stuff like this. This is cool. Every one of these could probably have a short video on how to use every single one of these options and flags, and you can do some friggin' cool stuff. The grammar one was, to me, just such a stupid easy, stupid simple, but profound discovery, because this right here, yes, you're gonna use this in automation all the time. I could get lost in this. Just being able to guide the conversation, you're able to interrupt it and put in your own thoughts. I'm just doing stupid little one-liners, or you can put in some very verbose, elaborate ideas and guide its output as it's outputting it just by doing a quick interrupt with a Control C, type it in and press enter and let it rip from there, and it will head off into whatever direction that you're sending it. Mid-generation, you can stop it. This is awesome. I don't see this happening pretty much anyway. Maybe it is, and I just don't see it because I'm not looking at the chat boxes anymore. And the thing is, you can take this functionality right here and you can integrate this right into your own GUI. If you really want a chat box, setting up a chat box with Tkinter and PyQt and PySimple GUI, it is not hard. And yes, we're going to do it. I don't know if it'll be in this LLaMafile series, but we're absolutely going to be building a bunch of different things because it's just too stupid easy. All these things have become way too easy to do. Control C out of that. And, I just wanted to show you a couple of these things that if you're going the pre-built route, yes, they have enough pre-built LLaMafiles out there for you to do a bunch of cool stuff. We didn't even touch. We probably touched on less than 10%, way under 10% of the awesome things that you can do, because there's just not enough time in one video. If we even built a quarter of this stuff, if we just did their simplest examples, like the simple rag example, the way that I can show you how to flesh this out into something sophisticated, just keeping the building blocks of it simple, iterating this both horizontally and vertically, you can build something stupid sophisticated, and it works. You'd be surprised at how accurate and how sophisticated you can make a rag system just by starting with a simple building block and building it out horizontally and vertically. And yes, you start to chew up some compute. We finally got some DeepSeek models downloaded. Yes, you can chew up some compute, but that's the cost of it. And yeah, even when you build these things, you can add a little bit of code in and use, integrate the monster models and have a rag system like OpenAI just cannot give you. I can't even imagine being able to interrupt the OpenAI monster models like you can interrupt and talk like real time with these. That's awesome. I think that's so cool. And then being able to limit its grammar, it doesn't just have to be down to yes or no. You can add, there's a grammar file with all kinds of things that it can respond with, but anything that's not in there, and you have to look up if you really want to learn to use that. that, you got to look up the grammar rules for the BNF like grammar. But man, there's just so much. There's so stinking much that you can do with this. It's unreal and it's awesome. We've gone quite a ways too far with this, obviously, as I always do, but I just wanted to show you those couple things. In the next video, we should come right in, learn how to use Make. We should build the tools and use the individual tools, whether we get into the repo and build these things, or if, like I'm demonstrating a Llama 3.2.3b Llama file, maybe I will demonstrate downloads. So I've got some DeepSeek models now. I can demonstrate using those tough guys. And, you know, let's see in the next video, maybe, let's see what these Whisper files can do. Transcribing, you know, taking in audio files and recording ourselves right at our microphone, and see just how fast we can get it to being like real time talking to a Llama file, to another text-based Llama file. And I believe you can set these up on a server too, you know, so that it has endpoints that you can reach with various programs. I want to see just how fast from the time I start recording on the microphone, then it takes that file, sends it to Whisper file, that transcribes the text, sends it to a text LLM, which generates a response and shoots it back to me. I want to see how fast that can actually be, and with the accuracy. That's probably one that I don't know if most people want to see it, but I sure do. That might be the next one. We'll see. If I don't have a lot of luck setting it up, the next video might be building the repo to get all the tools, and then you can build your own Whisper files and stuff like that. But if I get this working easy enough, the Whisper file will be the next video. So hopefully I didn't bore anyone. Hopefully some of you are as excited as I am about this stuff. You know, this Llama file, it's just so underrated and not talked about. And man, you know, as our hardware gets more powerful, this Llama file ecosystem is going to explode, because the coolest thing about all this is that the whole point of a Llama file is that you have one executable, and it's a large one, but you have one executable and it works everywhere without any tweaking. You know, to run it on Windows, you got to add .exe, and then you do have the file size limit, the bull crap Windows problems. But on like every other system in the world, this thing just works across systems. You don't have to build it specifically for your system like you do everything else. What they did here with the Cosmopolitan library and Llama CPP, and however, I don't even know how they did it yet, to be honest with you. It's too much for me to take in all at once. But man, this thing is cool. This thing is so freaking cool. So I'm going to dive into a couple directions, whether I build the tools out of the repo or do a demonstration with the Whisper file. We'll see which one comes next. I try to do these things fairly fast, so it should be in just a couple days. We'll see you in the next one.